Okay, okay, at this moment we are ready to put an environment behind this character and or this object better, and we want to start by creating a ground plane. On the ground plane we are going to apply a texture connected to it. I got from texture.com an image that provided this image, and we said that we need to adjust it um, because it needs to fit square so that the UV map fits there. If you can tell the UV map being completely square. So let's do that. I'm going to launch Photoshop and I'm going to open up that file in Photoshop. Actually, I have one already down there. So let me open it up and do it one more time here. So here's the image, and we said it's going to be square. So for that, we're going to start by cropping it using the cropping tool, and we need to also look at the image size of it. Let me do the image size first, just to make sure. Right now this image is 1600 by 1242 at 240 pixels per inch. So I'm going to change the resolution by unchecking resampling, so that I'm going to change it to 72 dpi, which is what the pixels per inch that we get. That will increase the file image size, but it doesn't change the image at all, just change the resolution. That way I can now go and crop it. So I'm going to go and call my cropping tool right there, and right away it shows up. I have here set up square because that's what I need to do, and with that square I'm going to shrink it down to the point that I can get some sort of like a tileable object, something that I can see. It starts with one edge and end with the next one, and see if I can do it right here, maybe halfway of one tile here and halfway of the other ones here and halfway of the other ones there. That gives me a bit of better opportunity to tile the scene. It won't match on this other end, but at least if I can get it to tile on both ends, that'll be fine. So with that, I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard, and I got that image. And let's just make sure that the image now, I'm going to adjust the size. I'm going to now check resampling it, so I can just check how many pixels per inch. And I need to make this one 1024 by 1024 at 72 dpi. So that's the actual image, and I'm going to here adjust brightness and contrast a little bit, just to punch a little bit the color there. And I'm going to save this file as a PNG or a TIFF, not a JPEG, please. So I'm gonna call this one floor color dot TIFF. I had already done it before, but let's just call it like that to save. And also I'm going to create a bump from it. So I'm going to just, with the same image, I'm going to adjust the brightness and the contrast so I can get the wider and the darker areas to be more saturated. That way I can use those for my bump effect. There we go. I'm gonna hit OK. You can try painting some of those grooves a bit more if that's what you want to do. You want to give more contrast to those. For now, I'm going to keep them like that. I'm going to just save this one as another TIFF. This one is going to be called floor bump as a TIFF. I'm going to save that down. Alright, let me go back to Maya and connect those to the ground floor. So I'm going to create a shader for this, and this shader is going to be a standard shader. This one I'm going to just do it no presets for now, just to make it simpler for me. And on that standard shader I'm going to rename it standard floor, and I'm going to change the color to connect it to that image. So that we have the floor color, there is. Open it up, and I'm going to assign that material to this object. If I turn on my my textures here, I should be able to see it. There it is. And I'm going to connect to that the bump also. So I'm going to connect under the geometry part the bump map. Following the bump value, there it is. And then I'm going to go and click on my floor bump. Open it. And that kind of pushes the effect right away there. And I'm going to test render this to see how it looks. So that takes a little bit to calculate. And there is the effect. It's looking okay. It will look a bit glossy for the material. So I'm going to turn down the glossiness on it. So I'm going to turn down the glossiness by bringing down the specularity and then pumping up the roughness. Let me test render it one more time. That makes it a little bit better, and that's for now the basic job that I want. The color is a bit dark, but I'm going to finish setting up my scene before I change any colors on it or any adjustments on it. Alright, now I'm going to create the background, and the background for that I'm going to create a new camera, and that camera I'm going to use it to be my rendering camera. So the rendering camera allows me to see and look at my object from the perspective that I'm going to be rendering it from. Right there, basically for now. And I'm going to connect to that a background picture. So the background picture, I'm going to do it through an image plane. So let me just show first the picture that I downloaded. So I have this brick wall, which is not a square image, and I don't plan to change it as a square image for now, because that's what I got from textures.com. And I needed to stay that way because if we make it a square, it's going to be cropped for too much. So I'm going to try to use it as is, but this time I'm going to use it by creating an image plane. And there is my picture, and it gets added to the camera that I'm using to render. That picture is showing, if you activate the resolution gate, is not covering the whole background. So I need to change the image plane by changing under the image plane settings. You can fit it by the horizontal or fit it to the vertical. That way your image grows, and you can try to set it up that way. Or you can have your own kind of fit it into the film gate or to the resolution gate, which is the area that you want there. And if you want to move it and say you have your creature or your object sitting there, I'm going to maybe move up the photograph a little bit, and I can simply just on the offset I can just move it up. I'm gonna say 0.1. That's a bit too much. I'm gonna bring it down to 0.005, maybe 0.06, maybe 0.01, 0.2. I'm gonna leave it like that. I'm trying to align this edge right there. I may have to adjust that later on, but of course my plane is not matching, so I'm going to change my plane. I'm gonna make it right now and scale on that direction. I'm going to scale it right now. It's 15, so I'm going to make it on that direction 30, which is kind of double the size. By doing that, if I look at it from my perspective again, you see that my tiles get stretched because of course the UVs come from a square object. So for that we need to make sure we correct that tile. I just graph that visual, and what we need to do is we need to change the scale of the placement of the texture, which is the purple node here, and we're gonna change it so that we can scale on V, repeat it twice. That's doing it for the color. Now I need to do it for the bump. So I'm gonna repeat it twice on that one too. That way you get to see my texture, the scale that it needs to be. Let me go back to the camera number 2, and I'm gonna save my scene before it render it. So let me call my render window. I'm at the render that camera, render camera shape 1 in this case. I might just render that out. That looks okay. It's getting better. There are a few things that I would like it to be different. I would like to manipulate the floor a bit more. The background picture needs to move up, but more importantly, you need to get rid of this white area. That bright spot is just simply the image plane, and let it see through where to look at show the sky dome behind it. So I'm going to stop that. I'm going to select that sky dome, and I'm going to hide it from the camera. So I'm going to click on my sky dome. Under the settings of my sky dome, if you remember, we talked about this before, there is visibility. I'm going to bring down the visibility of the sky dome so the camera doesn't see it anymore. So I'm going to press it again. There we go. We got the sky dome to do what it needs to do there. The other thing is that the picture is being cropped a little bit on the image plane, so I'm going to crank it up a little bit. Let me say 0.03. Test it again. Looks a bit off on one side, a bit better on the other side. I can try rotating it a little bit if I want to. I don't know how many degrees I have to do. I'm going to try it here. I'm going to say -2 degrees. Too far, -1 degree. That one covered it a little bit better, and now I need to bring it down to maybe 0.29 or 28. There we go. I'm getting a little better alignment right there. So as always, it's very important to be picky about those things. You never want to be, leaving little details behind. Okay, so I got my background plane sort of aligned, my ground plane aligned. There are things that I still get annoyed by. I think that now that I'm looking at my object again, I see the bump is a bit too strong still. And I need to adjust some of the colors of the ground plane. So let me do that first. I'll start with the bump of the object because I'm not pleased with it. I'm going to click on the object, I'm going to graph it, and there is an option here under the texture that allows me to change the color balance of that image, so I can bring up the exposure a little bit so that I can see it. Let me just press render so that when I change it too bright, I'm going to bring it down to say 0.8 or so. So that brings it down a tiny bit, so it was not too dark. I'm going to say 0.7 maybe. That helps a little bit with both the color and the bump, because both are connected. It just makes it a little bit too, I'm going to say 0.5 maybe. But additionally to that, I'm going to change, in this case, the bump again. It's very minimal, but I'm going to bring it down to -0.001. Really to almost nothing, but that makes the effect a lot better. It's not so shiny, not so and I'm going to bring down on the shader the roughness a tiny bit. When I click on the shader, bring that roughness better, crank up the roughness so that it loses a little bit of that shiny look. Maybe that's a bit too much. There we go. Now I'm going to also do the same on the ground. The floor feels it's too gray, and also I can see so much specularity on it. So let me click on the object. I'm going to graph it here, and then I'm going to just try to crank up the exposure of the color of that 1.1. You can tint it if you want to a little bit, so that you can see. That might not be much. I'm going to say 0.5. That brightens it up a little bit. You can color gain. Let's say you want to give a tint on it. Let's say you can go into the oranges and make it a little bit less. Um, that's too far, I guess. Or you can do it into the blues and try to get into more of the blues. Right now I'm going to try to maybe stay on the just pure white for now, and not change it. Um, I can crank up I try to crank up the bump for that, so that I can make that object. I'm going to say 1. Let's see that looking. I'm going to try to say 2. Oh, that's too much. 2. I think my keyboard is not working. Number lock there's. Alright, 2 tries to do a better job. It's not ideal, but that tries to do a better job. And there are other ways of improving it, but for now we're going to minimize so that we don't add too many things on the process. I'm going to stop that one right there for now, and I'm going to save my file. Another increment and save. And the last thing that I'm going to do with this, actually there are a couple of things. I want to, if you look at the render view, the highlights are kind of coming from behind the wall, which that doesn't make sense, although I like the rim that is given, but it's not exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm actually going to go and look at it from the perspective view, and I'm going to rotate the sky dome so that those lights come from the sides, so that gives me a bit more of a fill light on one, and that makes it maybe a bit better. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to animate my object so that I can do the turnaround. For that, I just need to select the geometry for my head and the 2 eyeballs. I'm going to group them. I'm going to call them Homer head. And now I need to animate him. I'm going to animate him rotating 360 degrees in 120 frames. So I'm going to change to my animation menu set. And I'm going to, on frame 1, I'm going to put set keys, which will be the same as you press your S key on the keyboard. And then I'll go to frame 120, and I'm going to make rotate in Y 360 degrees. And then I press the S key so that I can see it rotating. There's one thing that I ignored, and is that the object is punching through the ground. So let me fix that. I'm going to change the translating Y. I'm going to push it up a little bit, let's say to 0.1. There we go. That's on frame 1. So I'm going to make sure I press insert a key again, because I need to correct that. I'm going to go to the frame 120 and then say 0.1, because of course there was a keyframe there too. So I'm going to put an S so that the keyframe is there, so that the object stays on the ground and not peeking through the ground. Let me test render this. Okay, I think I'm happy with what I'm seeing. Try to get another frame. If that keeps happening, you just close your window and launch it again, so that it refreshes your rendering. There it is. Alright, so I'm ready to submit to render. So I'm going to at this moment, this rotation looks kind of odd, but on the render window it looks fine. So I'm going to go by my render window and not by my viewport. See if it seems off here. Alright, I'm going to do my settings. So I'm going to say, again, calling the icon from the render settings, which could come also from rendering aid to render settings. You're using Arnold renderer. I'm going to call it Homer term, Homer piece, better. And I'm going to go make sure there is a TIFF sequence. LCW and integer 8 is fine. Use view transform is fine. I'm going to use name number extension. I'm going to render from frame 1 to frame 120. I'm going to change my camera to be my camera number 2, which is the camera I'm using here. I'm going to change the settings of my camera so it renders HD 1080, minimum HD 720. I'm going to keep 1080 here. So that's my first page, that's good. No need to change anything down there. I'm going to my render window, Arnold render, and I work on my sampling. So we start from the bottom up. I don't have any fluids or any special effects here. I don't have any subsurface scattering. I don't have any transparency. Transmission is transparency, so I'm going to say 0. 2 I need because there is reflection here. If I had reflection, I probably would have to crank that up. Diffuse I'm going to do 3, and camera I'm going to do 3. And I'm going to test out that frame. So that's going to take a couple of minutes to render. I'm going to pause my video while that happens. Okay, my render just finished. It seems pretty decent at this moment. I can do a few things to crank it up more, and maybe I can try to crank up some of my samples. You can evaluate it in my case because it's very noisy ground. I don't get to see it much. So I'm going to just to crank it up a little bit because I know the value that I have there are very low. So I'm going to try to crank it up the diffuse to 4. That will give me a sharper shadow. I'm going to save my scene. I open my render window, the one with the little eye here, just to have it here. I was rendering it before, as you probably know. And then I'm going to submit the render. So I'm going to change to my rendering menu set. I'm going to say render sequence. I make sure that I pick my camera 2 and add to render view, that way I can see the process. And with that, making sure that all my settings are correct and my name is correct. And I have the camera and the frame rate. I'm all good to go. So I'm just render sequence, and Maya start pumping out the frames at the bottom. I suggest you don't just let it go for the whole night. Go and wait for a few frames that they pump out. I'm working right. If something is not wrong, is not working right, or something is wrong, the camera is not the right one, or the frame size is not the right one, or the image doesn't look right. For now, I'm going to let it crank, and hopefully that will give us the result that we want. Alright, good luck with it, and hopefully you get a good modeling, a good texturing and rendering of your piece.